Welcome to the Archangel's Feast. For this conversation, I sat down with Mike, a friend of mine, and we talked about how we think about sexuality, how our perceptions about it were influenced by our Catholic upbringing, how the dialogue around sexual issues can focus too much on rules which stipulate what not to do, and how to talk positively about the motivations behind a more traditional lifestyle, about what you do rather than what you're not allowed to do. Bear in mind, this wasn't intended as a family-friendly conversation. We talk frankly about sexuality and surrounding topics, and we also talk briefly about swearing, where a couple were dropped towards the end. There were some growing pains here, as this was our first podcast. I think there were some butterflies in the stomach when we started recording, but the nerves calmed down a bit as we got into the conversation, which turned out to be a good one. A couple definitions and clarifications which might be helpful for listeners. Natural family planning, or NFP, is a method of natural birth control where you have sex only during infertile times of the woman's cycle. It's gotten the green light from the Catholic Church, which offers NFP classes for couples who are preparing for marriage. Also, when we use words like sin and chastity, they're meant to be factual statements about what the Church teaches. We aren't implying anything about people who commit sins. With that said, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this as much as we did. And we're recording.
All right, we're live. Except not really. It's just recording.
So I was thinking about the topic today, and you actually had an NFP class scheduled.
Yes.
So I figured, why don't we just talk about the church and sexuality and all that?
Yeah, let's do it.
You were going to take the class with your fiance, right?
Correct, yeah. So we are engaged right now, and part of the process of getting ready to get married in Catholic Church is you have to take a course in natural family planning, which is a way of naturally controlling the times you are pregnant or not pregnant. So I thought I was supposed to do it today. I just got mixed up or whatever. It's actually, I'm going to be starting it 2 weeks from now, actually, and it's going to be with my fiance, and the instructor is going to be in Jacksonville, but she's going to be up here with me, and we're going to do it over VoIP, and then the instructor has some sort of program that we'll be logged into, and I think it goes through slides and stuff like that. So we're basically doing an online course with her. So we're definitely excited to try that out. But
dumb question, but is the NFP class required to get married in the church? I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, actually,
I know every Catholic couple takes it, but I don't know if it's actually a requirement.
Technically, I think from just bare bone requirements, obviously not, but it's one of those things where it's a obedience thing where the priest or the bishop commands that it be done, so then you have to follow. The priest is telling us we have to do it, so we have to, as loyal or obedient servants of the church, we have to now follow the priest's instruction on that. So
interesting. So
I think it's more of a
diocese or parish level thing.
that's what I actually am not 100% sure, but that's what I kind of just suspect is the case. So technically the only requirement, from my understanding, the only requirement to get married in the church is you need 2 witnesses, and then the man and the woman, and then they consummate the marriage, and then that's the bare bones requirements. Yeah. Technically, not even a priest is required, although if a priest is available, you're supposed to use a priest. It would be sinful to not use a priest if it was available, but I think the church has that specific rule of the 2 witnesses, where you can imagine maybe in colonial times where maybe you lived out in the frontier and you didn't have access to a priest, but maybe every half a year or once a year or so, you don't want to wait 6 months because you might be dead from whatever perils lie living in a western or frontier town. So
welcome to the jungle.
I also imagine that being a thing for if we start to colonize Mars. Let's say there's no priests there initially, and then you can have people get married.
It'd be like an archdiocese of Mars.
Archdiocese of Mars, yeah. That's weird to think about, but yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So anyways,
that's weird. There's a lot of rules. I didn't know that, actually. That's kind of cool.
2 witnesses, because technically the sacrament of marriage, as I understand, it's not, the priest doesn't marry you, it's between the man, the woman, and God. So it's a sacrament, the sacrament is between man, woman, and God. So that's, the priest just I guess he pronounces you man and wife, but it's actually the man and the woman that make that sacrament. That's how the sacrament is instituted, is through the man and the woman. So.
Yeah. So someone else kind of listening into this, I think has the impression that the church likes to regulate sexuality.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's what we were going to talk about tonight. So let's just dive into that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of rules.
Definitely. Yeah. So
and as you were just laying out, just with how to get married and the rules for a wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's pretty much aware of what the church teaches as far as expressing your sexuality, like porn and masturbation and sex outside of marriage. I think everyone's pretty much aware of that.
Yeah. So actually, I really want to start talking about what we were talking about before we start recording here, which is I think it's interesting to kind of dive into what our views were of the church's teaching on sexuality when we were younger and how that's changed, why it's changed, why we believe what we believe now. So just to kind of get started. So what...
I think it would be cool to get a big picture view out there and see what's going on.
So just a question for you. So when you were a teenager, how did you view the church's teaching on sexuality? Like what were describe how you viewed it.
I think it was out of context for a long time. I think it was a lot of do nots. Mm-hmm. Do not do this, do not do that. And if you follow all the rules, that was, quote, chastity. And
right.
That's just kind of how I define the term in my head, was if you follow all these do nots, then you're in a state of chastity, whatever that means.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same way. Like it was like, oh, you can't masturbate or you can't watch porn. It's like, but I really want to do that. And it's like, all right, well, I guess I won't do that. It just felt like a sacrifice and like something that I felt like it was just something that I was giving up just for the sake of not committing a mortal sin or not being in this, maintaining my state of grace.
It's just things that you were trying to not do, and you could be asking yourself, what's the purpose? Like, why?
Yeah, right.
Why would I put myself through this?
Yeah, it was a very temporal way of looking at the Catholic Church's teaching. Like, it was just in this moment, what am I immediately losing? I couldn't really understand or grasp the bigger explanation for why the church teaches what it does.
Right. And I think so hopefully what we could do is kind of break away from the fixation on maybe what we can call negative rules.
Yeah.
So there's, let's say, negative injunctions, which is don't do this, don't do that. And then there's, let's say, positive rules, which are do this, do that. Maybe that's how we could define the terms.
Well, I think one of the things with these negative injunctions versus positive injunctions that you talk about is the negative. They seem to always be something really concrete. You can really put your finger on, like I said before, masturbation or premarital sex. If someone does that, it's very, very easy to point out and say, yes, that was done, and that is something you're not supposed to do. And so it's easy to understand what the negative injunctions are, but the positive injunctions or the positive benefits, you could say, of following the church's teaching, they almost seem more abstract and harder to define or harder to see how they actually fit into your life. So,
well, I think the problem is if it's well defined, then it's abstract. So I think the positive injunction behind this all would be natural law theory, which says do what your body is designed to do. Mm-hmm. And if you look at sexuality, it's designed for reproduction.
Right.
So use it for that.
True. Yeah,
And that's the positive injunction, which is use your sexuality in the context of a relationship where you're going to make a family.
Right.
And so that's the positive injunction. But how does that play out into somebody's life? It's a lot easier, I think, to talk about that in terms of negative rules, which is don't do that, don't do, don't have sex outside of marriage, don't have sex if you're not, open to kids.
Right.
And when you're younger, especially when you're younger, or if you're outside the church, it's easy to fixate on the negative implications, the negative rules, and say, look at this lifestyle you have to live now. That sounds dumb.
Yeah.
So what's the context in which it's not dumb?
Yeah.
And I think that's hopefully what we can get at, right?
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on what the positive injunctions or what's What's the what's the lifestyle that
so I mean
is
I
worth
think
having?
I can kind of speak to it on I would say two different levels. Like there's kind of a personal, my own personal experience, and then just looking at society at large. I would say just from a personal experience, from my own personal life experiences, when I am following the church's teaching on chastity and maintaining a pure life and chaste life, I feel more. I don't know. It's kind of like hard to describe, but have you ever heard of actually? I'm just gonna bring up a reference that probably some people may have heard of, but there's this movement online. It's called it's no PMO. It's porn, masturbation, orgasm. I feel like that the orgasm part I think is a little bit extreme if you're obviously in a married relationship with someone, but the idea is there's all these videos you can find on YouTube of people talking about how, or it's no hashtag nofap. Where
I do know that hashtag.
Yeah. So there's hashtag nofap and then no PMO. The nofap one I think is kind of a little bit more popular, but it's people that they're not even necessarily Catholic or even Christian, but they've found that when they are living, they found out when they're essentially abstaining from masturbation and pornography, that they feel all these, or they notice all these benefits in their life, like increased energy, increased confidence, increased motivation, and it takes you have to basically stop masturbating and watching porn, and you have to do that for weeks and weeks and weeks before you even start to notice the benefit. But
you start to develop a disciplined lifestyle and you start reaping the benefits.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. It's hard to describe, but I can definitely attest from my own experience, of once you go, I would say the first week of abstaining from porn and masturbation, you start, that's after that first week is when you start to notice a increase in confidence and energy, and you go on to 4 weeks and 6 weeks and then 6 months, and people describe it's almost developing superpowers of your ability to focus and be confident and stuff like that, and that's just that's kind of a temporal benefit, I would say. Obviously that's not there may be some spiritual aspect to that, but that's sort of a temporal benefit, which, I mean, if the church is correct in its teaching, then I think it would be I think you would expect to see some sort of temporal benefit from, or material benefit from, following its teachings. But that's just something I can definitely attest that is definitely true. When I am not watching porn or masturbating, I feel just overall better and more energetic and confident. So
kind of flipping that around a little bit, I've never been in a state of flow and wanted to pause to masturbate. I've never been, let's say I'm playing piano and I'm, learning a new song, or I'm learning a new technique or something, and I'm, in a state of flow where I'm, doing something new and it's working out and I'm excited about it. Or
true, yeah.
I'm doing a podcast with you right now and I'm having a good time. I don't want to go to the bathroom now.
yeah. Well, that's
I'm never if I'm doing something that I really want to be doing, then that's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Or if in jiu-jitsu class,
right,
I never want to take a break just to
wank one off.
Yeah.
So actually, that's part of So that actually kind of primes something else for me to think about, which is part of the idea of this no masturbation, no porn, is that you're you're basically taking your sexual energy and you are putting it towards something productive. So instead of, basically, if you're masturbating, you're just basically just wasting your sexual energy on yourself. And it's not even on yourself, it's just it's basically just a waste of sexual energy, which I think is different than I think that's different than having sex with another person, where it's almost like you're exchanging sexual energy and kind of building on it. Whereas if you're just masturbating, you're basically throwing away your sexual energy. And so if you are abstaining from that, then you do have more energy and drive to do other things, like play an instrument, go to jiu-jitsu, do a podcast.
I guess two thoughts on that. One is, it's interesting when we try to put a negative spin on, let's say, a sin. Mm-hmm. If we try to put a negative spin on masturbation, it's a wasted sexual energy, I think trying to focus on it in that way, I never got a lot of mileage out of that.
Okay.
As far as if I'm trying to, stay disciplined about it, trying to focus on trying to tell that negative narrative in my head as an excuse to not do it, that never really worked out for me.
Gotcha.
For me, it was, and this is the second point, for me it was always, what kind of person do I have to be in order to just not spend my time jerking off? Mm-hmm. And for me, that's I go to work, I go to the gym, I go play piano, I hang out with friends, family, do the podcasts, fill up my time with meaningful things, in a relationship if I'm in one, and fill my life up with meaningful things, and then I guess chastity would happen as a byproduct.
Right. That's actually really good. That's really good insight. Like, it's so kind of what you're saying is that if you are living a chaste life, you just find that it's not that you're not doing the things that you're not, or it's kind of confusing, but you're not doing the things you're not supposed to do. You're just doing all the things that you should be doing, and you just don't have time to do the things that are unproductive or don't really benefit you, which would be masturbation.
Because if I'm just alone, for an afternoon, and I'm in my head, and all of a sudden, I just want to go look at porn, and if I just try and tell myself not to do it, that's not a sustainable strategy.
Gotcha.
To put it mildly.
Yeah.
I think for me, I have to be kind of planning out my day, or having days that I'm just doing meaningful things, and feeling productive and feeling good, and just crashing with a smile, crashing to bed with a smile on my face, saying I killed the day. And when I have those days, I just happen to be following the church's teachings on sexuality as a byproduct.
Yeah.
And just focusing on phrasing sins in a negative way. Just for some, maybe I don't know if it's different for other people, but it wasn't sustainable for me.
Yeah, got you.
I don't know if.
Well, I can definitely see what you're saying, and like I think too the problem with, or one of like the pitfalls with framing the sexual morality of the church in a negative way is that when you do, I feel like I can speak from my own personal experience.
See what
like
I'm saying about the fixation on the negative rules?
Yeah. So like when you do fall, like let's say you do fall to sexual temptation, then it's almost like it's easier to like fall again because you've already put yourself in a place where you're like kind of in this negative space that you've fell to sexual sin, and because you're just looking at the church's teaching as a totally negative thing. It's like, well, I've already fallen, I've done the negative thing, so it's like it's in a way it's like easier to keep doing that negative thing. Whereas if you look at it from look at the overall teaching as a positive thing, like even if you do fall, you say, well, okay, I may have fallen to temptation today, but I'm looking to reap the positive benefits of following this teaching. So why would I keep like doing this negative thing? Because I know that tomorrow I can like experience, I guess, like positive benefits from it. So
the way I would phrase it in my mind is if I commit a sin, it's like I was in a state of grace, now I'm not. So what's the point?
True.
Of doing another one? Because it's almost like going from 0 sins to 1 sin.
Yeah.
Is worse than going from 1 to 2.
True.
It's once you've crossed the threshold from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
The difference between 1 and 2 seems a lot smaller.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're in I don't know, just like random thing I'm thinking about, but if you are trying not to get, let's say it's like rainy and you're trying not to get wet, but then you start to get wet or you start to get soaked, and then you're like, well, I'm already like soaked, so I might as well just stay out in the rain. Or like I'm trying not to get dirty, but then someone throws like mud on you, and it's like, all right, well I'm already got mud on my shirt, so I might as well start rolling around in the mud. I think that's definitely a similar mentality that happens with sin, especially with like the way the church is teaching on like mortal sin and loss of the state of grace. And
so this is where I think fixating on the positive rules instead of the negative rules might shed some light. So if we try to make a comparison to diet.
Okay.
Something I did this weekend. It was my birthday weekend, so I was out drinking, and I had more ice cream than I usually do. I think I had a carton of ice cream, which was maybe 2,400 calories in one sitting. So I'm trying to pay attention to my diet, and I was like, I consumed all these calories in the weekend. I'm just going to eat at a deficit this week, and that'll, balance me out. And that's what I've been doing. And it's not because I'm punishing myself for eating the ice cream. It's I want to live a healthy lifestyle. I want to, pay attention to my weight and to my calorie intake. I want to work out. And so if I eat some ice cream, well, then that's a calorie surplus, and I'll eat at a calorie deficit tomorrow, and it'll even out, and back to healthy. It's a fixation on the healthy lifestyle, which stops me. It's not like, oh, I ate the ice cream, so I'm going to eat it more on Monday and then again on Tuesday.
Right.
If I'm fixated on the healthy lifestyle, I eat it once and it's like, it's a calorie surplus. I'm not going to freak out about it. I'll just eat at a calorie deficit tomorrow.
Yeah.
And kind of plan for that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when we fall into sin. Why is it that we, say, "Oh, I sinned once, I'll do it again"?
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting take. So, what's the positive fixation we should have? Instead of fixating on the negative rules, don't do this, don't do that. What's the positive that we could focus on that actually leads to a balance like that?
Yeah.
A sort of self-correcting balance.
Yeah.
And one way I thought about it was that when I am following the church's rules, yes, I am living that more purposeful life. Like when I'm living more purposefully, I am, as a byproduct, more chaste. So I try to pursue that life of purpose, where I'm just doing things that are more meaningful to me all the time, and I'm trying to more consciously do that. If I have free time, I'll try and read. Like I'll try and I got free time, I'll try and have a hangout with friends, or I'll try and just fill my time.
With something productive.
I'll take jujitsu classes. Trying to fill the day up with things that I'll actually enjoy and get something out of.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a practical way of living a more purposeful life, but there's also a spiritual aspect to this.
Right.
And for me, when I'm in a groove like that, when things are going well, and when I'm chaste as a byproduct of that, I've also noticed about I'm less selfish. For example, I pay more attention to people and how they're doing, and I'm more attentive to asking about what's going on in their life and their head. And I'm also more likely to hang out with people, not for my own enjoyment, but for example, I have younger siblings. And I'm more likely to want to spend more time with them. Yeah. It's less of a selfish thing.
Yeah. Well,
and, if I'm being more selfish, I might just hang out with people who, just make me laugh and we could drink with, and it's more of a selfish thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense in a way, in that, sexual sins are usually something that part of the reason that they're sinful is that it's a turning in on yourself of a act which is meant to be shared with someone else. So like masturbation is just your own self-gratification. It's a very, I guess, selfish act, you could say. So when you refrain from doing that, then I think it helps you to be less selfish in other areas of your life. So also I feel like I have noticed that when I am living a more chaste life, I feel like I do want to be around people more, and I feel like I can empathize better with people, and I can read people better. It's kind of weird, but
you have a better clarity with people.
Yeah, I have better clarity with people, and I think part of it is it's this image of masturbation of turning in on yourself, and that's what it is. It's it's almost like masturbation is, for some people, it is kind of almost like an escape from reality, in a sense. Instead of it is, because it is a completely selfish act. It requires you to just turn it on yourself for your own, you're doing it for your own self-pleasure. So it also kind of puts you in your own, for me, if I'm engaging in that frequently, I feel more in my head. I definitely feel more turned in on myself. Whereas if I'm living more chastely, I guess, I say as someone who's not, because obviously if I'm not married, then I'm not engaging I should not be engaging any sort of sexual act. But because
and I think what you're saying, it all holds. I don't mean. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
I think everything we're talking about, it still holds, even if we talk about the littlest sin, masturbation. Even if we put that in the most charitable light, where it's no big deal. I'm just a guy with a high sex drive.
Yeah.
I'll take 5, and then
Yeah.
afterwards I'll be more focused on whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
That's the most charitable way
Yeah,
to put
yeah,
it
yeah.
in.
That'd be like,
I think it's still whole, because if I'm just living a life where I'm, doing things that are meaningful to me all the time, and I never think to take a break like that on on that, I think that's the life worth striving for, and it's worth having. Mm-hmm. So even if we
So wait, so what do you mean? Like, what do you mean exactly?
So I think there's a way of talking about, sins, which is a negative way, which is it's selfish, it's inward turning, and I think those are true. But I think, you want to be careful with terms with people, because, some people, like, there's definitely been times for me, it's just like, it's just take 5, where it's not a big part, it doesn't become a big part of my day. I'm just a dude with a sex drive.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just, it's just, an actual 5, and then I feel more focused afterwards.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go play piano and do all these things. So I think that's the most charitable way of putting it. But even then, I think the church is pushing us to ask ourselves, what kind of person would we have to become to not even do that?
Yeah.
And so the kind of person I would have to become is someone who's just engaged in meaningful activities all the time. And honestly, I think that's a person worth becoming. Because I have gone through a period of my life. There's been periods in my life where I've broken the rules more frequently, broken them but less frequently, and then just followed them completely.
Yeah.
There's a period, my last couple of years of high school, I didn't break any of the rules, straight up. I followed them all. And those are probably some of the most meaningful years of my life. Like I was playing baseball in high school. Then I went onto the robotics team. I was taking all these AP classes. I was gearing up for college, getting set for my career, doing, just killing it in school. And things were pretty much the best, couple of the best years of my life. Where I was just doing things that were meaningful to me, kind of nonstop. And honestly, those were happy. Like, they were happy years. I didn't even think to stop and take 5.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I didn't even it came to my mind, like, literally once.
Yeah.
Like, that's how much of in a flow I was in.
Yeah.
Where literally once, over maybe a 1.5 year period, I was tempted to just, go watch porn.
Yeah.
Literally once, like, the temptation only came once over a 1.5 year period. When I was in high school. Like, I'm a, horny teenager.
That's
But I was just
in
in a state of flow.
Yeah.
Where I was just doing all these great things.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just never occurred to me. And on top of that, those were some of the happiest years of my life.
Yeah,
And so it's like, it's worth recreating.
Yeah.
It's harder as an adult. You got more free time, so it's what do I do with my...
Yeah.
What do I do? But that was definitely, a lifestyle that I feel was worth recreating.
Well, yeah, that's the thing though, is like you may feel like a short-term effect of, masturbating, but I think in the long run the benefit comes from not, from abstaining, from not masturbating. So
Say that again. The benefit doesn't come from not masturbating.
Well, sorry. Yeah, I missed it. So in the short, you can maybe get a short-term benefit from masturbating, but the long term, it's more of a detriment, I guess, to do that.
Well, the long term is it's probably going to be part of your daily routine.
Yeah.
More or less. And then it's, how am I spending my time? And then am I finding excuses to be lazy, or am I actively trying to fill up my life with meaningful stuff?
Yeah. And like I said, I think just like in my experience, like if you are kind of expending that sexual energy like daily or whatever, like it makes it harder for you to pursue. I think it makes it harder for you to pursue. For me personally, I would say it makes it harder for me to pursue like meaningful things in my life. So
yeah, where I'm less likely to break a lazy streak.
Right.
So let me phrase it a different way. Where if it becomes a part of your routine, you spend more time each day, or if it's not every day, more time each week. Let's say either jerking off, looking at porn. If you start spending time doing that, then you're going to start spending time. It does have a laziness impact.
Well, it's not even just the time spent on it aspect. It's just like when you in my opinion, like if you have like the sexual energy you have as a male, like that's there for a reason, and essentially nature it's not
go find a mate.
It's not natural for you to just expend it on yourself with no like end. So like either you're going to use it like as a single guy, I'm either going to use that to like go out and find a mate or develop myself so that I'm more desirable for a mate, or like right now as someone who's engaged, the way I kind of look at it is I'm trying to avoid, or I'm trying to resist that temptation to build sort of a sexual discipline for when I am married, because the way I kind of, I'm not married yet, but the way I kind of look at it, even when you are married, you still have to have sexual discipline.
Oh, and yeah. Let's pause on this point, because that's absolutely huge. I do not want to become a guy who gets married and then sneaks off at night to look at porn. I really don't want to be that guy.
Well, yeah. Okay, that's
forget about being the guy that cheats.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've already decided I'm not going to be that guy. But I don't want to be that guy. And I want to have some level of sexual discipline.
Right. That's super important.
And
developed. The way I kind of look at it is like right now is the time, as someone who's not married, now is the time for me to develop my sexual discipline, because like when I am married, yes, I'm going to have, you could say a sexual outlet, but I think, just from living and talking to people and getting to know people and learning about things that people do, like you realize that even when people are married, they still find themselves committing sexual sin, whether it be pornography or infidelity. And I think this is like the single life is the time to really develop that sexual discipline. So that really goes. So like right now, even if you're not religious, like even if you don't definitely
ascribe to the the Catholic definition of sin, think about do you want to be that guy,
right?
I don't think anyone does.
No. And well, going back to the pornography thing, like the reason I think that's so bad in a marriage, well, like I think that porn and masturbation, like even when you're married, is not a good thing, because there's two different like in a purely secular way of thinking about this. Like some people say, masturbation, even if you're married, that's fine, because that's just like you need to be able to have time to like explore your body or like pleasure yourself. Like maybe your partner's tired or doesn't want to have sex. Well, like if you're the way I look at it, if you're in a married relationship and your partner doesn't want to have sex with you, there's probably something wrong that needs to be addressed. And for guys, if they are not having sex and they're just masturbating, they're not going to have any sort of drive to try to figure out what the problem is. Like, so I'm going to try to like lay out this exposition here real quick, but like
sure.
Women and men, like our sexuality is obviously different. Like men, like we have this biological imperative to reproduce and to have sex. Women, they don't have that same. They don't have this. They have a sex drive and a desire for sex, but it's different in the sense that they don't have like a physical organ in their body that is like dry, like putting pressure on their body to like release, essentially. So like for a woman to want to have sex with someone, my understanding, like I'm a guy, so I'm just speaking from my like understanding as a guy, like they need to feel a sense of intimacy and emotional connection and emotional security. So in a relationship, if a girl doesn't want to have sex with a guy, it's most likely because she doesn't feel intimate, or she doesn't feel an emotional connection, or she doesn't feel secure in that relationship. So
there's a distancing effect.
Yeah. So like if a guy has not disciplined himself sexually and he enters into a marriage and he gets to a point where the wife doesn't want to have sex and his first thought is to go and masturbate, well, he's not going to have any sort of drive or desire to try to figure out why the desire for sex has decreased from his wife. So if you're following the church's teaching on sexual morality, and the only way you can have sex is through the man and the wife and the husband coming together for the marital union. well, if the wife suddenly doesn't want to have sex with him, he's going to do everything in his power to figure out why he's not able to have sex, So it's like it gives him an impetus to try and fix relational problems, or try to fix issues that are in the marriage.
Yeah, I don't want to linger too much on this.
Just
because I haven't experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Same here.
psychoanalyze. It's good to bring up. I don't want to psychoanalyze people that I can't yet relate to.
Right. True. Okay, we can reel it back a little bit.
Mid-20s.
All right. Let's go back to the sexual discipline. Okay, so we're talking about sexual discipline.
That's how we got here. Sexual discipline is valuable even if you're not religious.
Right.
And it's important to be able to control in what context you express your sexuality, to have some control over that, because that's a big that's a big part of learning about your sexuality is context. Is what context is it appropriate to do what things, and this is where we get back to why the positive injunctions are so hard to articulate briefly. To put a rule to it.
Yeah.
It's like it's so contextual. It's contextually rich. When is it appropriate to do what? How do you flirt? What are the rules for that? How do you positively do it? It's not simple.
Yeah.
It's not don't masturbate. That's a negative rule. That's easy to state. How do you express your sexuality? In what contexts?
Yeah.
And it's all about context.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so complicated, because social context is it's a bunch of unspoken rules that no one really fully understands or articulates.
I mean, some of the I don't know, just I'm kind of just clinging latching on to something you said, how do you flirt? Well, something that I think about too is when I
just look at him from across the room. I don't say anything.
Yeah, but I think actually having following the church in a very roundabout way, following the church's teaching on sexuality actually does help with that, because okay, so
you have a drive to improve.
Well, yeah, the drive to improve, but okay, when you're looking at a woman, if you just look at her as just an object for your own pleasure, women can sense that. I feel they don't want to women don't want to feel objectified. They want to feel valued and honored, and not as just some sex object. So if you're following the church's teaching on sexual morality, and you put yourself in a mindset of being able to looking at another person as another person, and respecting that person and honoring them, and you're flirting, you're not looking at the woman as just a potential sex object, but you're looking at her as you're looking at her as as another. Oh man, I'm sorry. I
wonder how we square this with.
I don't know. So basically, you look at her as they can I feel women can sense when you're looking at someone, looking at her, looking at them with respect, or I don't know.
Not to go down a rabbit hole.
Sorry,
but I wonder how do you square this with how does a guy be forward and assertive in a way that the girl likes? Yeah, well,
you're talking about just being confident and being assertive. That is something that's definitely. Women, I guess respond to but that I mean, if you go about it I'm gonna
go down a rabbit hole.
I'm gonna hold you up as this beautiful goddess that I will love and cherish and respect. No woman's gonna respond to that if that's in kind of that caricatured way. But if you do it, if you're more forward or assertive, then obviously. I don't know.
I'm just thinking I'm just thinking about certain when you're flirting.
Okay.
If you take and let's say you have chemistry.
Okay.
Maybe it's in a relationship, and you're being flirty.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely certain ways of flirting where if you take it out of context, that would be harassment and objectification.
Yeah.
But in context, for some reason she likes it.
Yeah.
That's all I was saying.
I think that's
a weird thing.
That's definitely true. I mean, well, it's kind of like that. Have you ever seen that? It's not a meme, but it's a comic where it's this really attractive guy at the workplace, and he's like complimenting a woman. It's like, oh, you look really great today in those shorts or whatever. She's like, oh, thank you. And then like it goes to the next slide, and it's like this ugly nerd. It's like, oh, you look really good in those shorts, and she's like, sexual harassment. So, like the person who's like, you can like have two different people say the exact same thing the exact same way, and it can be like interpreted completely differently. Like one is like sexual harassment, one is like flirting.
Yeah. So not to get lost in this wormhole.
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole.
This does bring us back to the bigger point that kind of got us here, which is contextual complexity, where it's sexuality is all about context, and like how do we appropriately express it? That's all social context, and it's complicated, and it's not something you learn right away. You know, like I think this is why we try to keep kids away from sex early on, and also why we try to keep kids away from swearing early on. Because we're giving them guns that'll knock them off their feet. It's something they don't know how to handle. They don't have the social awareness to handle these things. So let's just talk about swearing. It's strong words. Yeah. We don't want to give little kids strong words. Yeah. Because they don't know how to wield them in a way that's contextually appropriate. Because they don't have the nuanced context. And the same thing with sexuality. Yeah. Where you can't just give a kid who's like in the middle of puberty, license to express himself.
You're 12 years old. Here, have some condoms. I trust you. Like, I don't know. Well, maybe I don't know. I just like picture that. Like, some parents are like that actually, but yeah.
Well, the point being is, it's you got to be socialized, like maturely socialized to wield these things, like strong words, and then. Your sexuality, which is it's strong emotional content. I don't know of a better way to put that. Yeah, it's emotionally dense stuff. Right. It's very
like it has like impact. It'll impact your life in ways that are very
it's profound. Like
profound.
If you mess up, like I remember, my first experiences with girls, like. When I knew like, oh, this isn't going to work out. I don't think this is going to turn into a relationship. It's like, how do I handle this? Yeah. My first time or two trying to deal with that, it's like, well, what the hell do I do? Yeah. I don't want to hurt this person. Yeah. But like, True. And it's like, what's going on? And it freaks you out. And it's something, you gotta develop. You gotta learn. Like you gotta do it at some point. Yeah. You gotta make mistakes, get messy at some point.
I think I have a thought on that. Like why we. I gotta use the bathroom real quick. All right. Okay. So, with like why we like shield kids from like swearing, like sexual situations is like those are like I feel like alcohol, like alcohol, relationships, girls, and something like that. Those are the things like those kind of experiences are like. Some of the definitive experiences of growing up and like coming of age, and I think we have a tendency. I think adults have a tendency to want to try to essentially preserve the innocence and wonder of childhood. So we want to try to let kids live in this sort of pre-adult world as long as possible. A world where we don't worry about relationships and girls and alcohol and what's the next party and who's dating who and like those things. While they're very important for our development and growing up, but like they do become something that kind of steals or like changes someone from like a kid to an adult, and like there's like sort of like a loss of innocence. So. I think that's like I think that's like part of it, but
I think
maybe not well stated, but
I think I almost see an evolutionary logic to it, which is kids are going to swear anyway when they grow up, so what's the big deal of having them utter those words when they're younger or allowing them to do it? And I think the answer for me is they're strong words, and if you have a kid swearing at other kids, he doesn't know what he's doing to them. True. He doesn't know how people perceive him when he does that. So you don't want to have him in those situations where he's swimming in the deep end of the pool without his floaties. True. Because he doesn't know how to swim yet.
Yeah, he doesn't
he doesn't have the social awareness. Yeah. To
to have fun with it, to use it appropriately.
Right. He doesn't. Yeah. He doesn't like. He just learns there's this word that causes this emotional reaction to people, and he likes to wield it like a club, like a fucking club. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's also interesting too. Like, you know, a big naughty word is fuck. You know, and that means like essentially that means to have sex. But like a kid who's 9 years old who's saying fuck, like he's never had sex. He doesn't know what sex is. He doesn't know what sex is like. He's just like throwing around this word that's like a crass explanation for the act of sex. And he just doesn't have an appreciation or understanding for that word. So it's kind of like, what are you doing? Like saying that word? You're just saying that because
it's just a strong word, and it's getting reactions out of the other kids.
Yeah,
and he doesn't know what he's doing to them.
Yeah,
or and it's just you don't want to put him in that position.
Yeah,
you know?
I
think people articulate it poorly. Not to say, like if you want to say, oh, we're afraid of them losing their childhood innocence, I don't want to say that that's poorly articulated. I think that's insufficient rationale.
True.
If that makes sense. It's not poorly articulated.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Because, I think there is something to that where you don't want to see your kid, moms don't want to see their kid grow up,
Yeah.
And they don't want to see their kids swearing.
Yeah.
No one wants to see that. And that's a good way of articulating how we feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
But why is that actually true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Actually,
and I think it's because we don't want to give them something too strong for them.
Yeah, I haven't really thought too much about that. Like,
I haven't heard anyone else saying what I just said.
Yeah,
I just thought of that.
No,
I don't know.
That makes sense. I mean,
it does. But it's probably wrong because I just thought of it and said.
I mean, there might be something true about it.
There's a logic to it.
I mean, it makes sense. It kind of makes sense to me. I don't know. Like, I feel that's like cussing is one of those, like cussing and swearing. I don't know. It's like one of those things for me that.
You were in the Navy, right?
I'm in the Navy, so I cuss and swear a lot. So
yeah,
it doesn't feel like that big of a deal to me. And
yeah,
but I am. Part of me is like, if I'm like being honest about why I would, just like thinking right now why I would not want. Let's say I had kids. Like why I would not want them to swear is like, well, because it's not socially acceptable for a 10-year-old to swear. So there's sort of like a societal pressure to not have your kids swear, because parents who let their kids swear when they're 8 years old are usually like, I'm not saying this is true every time, but like if I just see an 8-year-old who's cussing and swearing, I just like, immediately think like, what the heck is wrong with their parents? It's like they have no control. It's like if you can't like teach your child not to swear, it's like it's almost like a sign of your inability to parent and control your child. So I think that's just like my initial like gut.
Yeah, it's a gut reaction.
Gut reaction of why I would not want my kids to swear. But as far as like a deeper reason for like,
what's the logic?
The more like logical or philosophical explanation for why I wouldn't want my kids to swear, I don't know. Like you said it better than I can think of anything. I don't know. Like maybe, or I mean, kind of just some of the other things I said, which is
no, it's just a random theory I have. It's probably wrong. I have no evidence for it, but
well, I mean,
it just seems to make sense. Well, I think this kind of brings us back to our, some of our broader points, which is, instead of focusing on the negative rules that the church lays out for sexuality, don't do X, Y, Z, what's the logic? Mm-hmm. And what's the deeper logic? And for me, it allows you freedom for the lifestyle that you have to have in order to actually follow those rules is such a good one that it's worth pursuing.
Yeah.
And that's the most condensed I could make it. Mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah, it's very hard to articulate though.
And it's worth having discipline.
Yeah.
It's worth I mean, if we could summarize it a little bit better than that, maybe it's what's the logic of the church's sexuality? It's looking at your body and doing what it's supposed to do. Yeah. Which means having a meaningful lifestyle, filling it up with meaningful activities. Yeah. And then, having sexual discipline so you could use it in the right context. Because in the right context, it is a beautiful thing. Right. And you want that. Yeah. You want to use it in the right context. But it's complicated and it's hard to capture in positive injunctions. Yeah. So it's expressed in a bunch of negative rules that people kind of fixate on without having a sense of the meaningful lifestyle you have to have in order to actually follow the rules. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the one paragraph version.
Yeah. That's not bad. And
Thank you.
shit, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's hard to. This is like one of those things that's just like so hard to. I feel like it's hard to explain, and it's hard to like.
Yeah.
It's hard to like convince people too. Like, and like
I don't. That's what I say when I'm dealing with people. Like, I don't want to say dealing with people, but I've had conversations where people are saying, "I don't understand the church's teachings.
Yeah.
It's outdated. Why are they mean to gay people?" I don't know if we want to go down a gay rabbit hole right now, but our brains are getting a little fried.
No.
But my reaction is like, well, what kind of person do you have to be to follow those rules? Mm-hmm. You know, I've been that person, and I know that person's worth being.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle, and there's so many great things about it. You know, you have sexual discipline, which is something everyone wants to have.
Yeah.
And you're filling your life up doing meaningful things, and it frees you up to have a spiritual clarity. You know, which is something we kind of touched on. Mm-hmm. But, you know, clarity when it comes to, you know, recognizing the value of other people, it absolutely does clarify that. Like, I'm more inclined to care about how someone else is doing.
Yeah.
I'm more inclined to hang out with people less for selfish reasons and more for just, you know, hanging out and being nice with people and being sociable. Yeah. And I think I have a better spiritual life, too. Yeah. Where it's not focused on, you know, self-gratification, you know, which like I don't have the patterns of self-gratification and laziness. If I can cut those out of my life, it frees me up to have, and I don't know why this is the case, but it has a certain spiritual clarity that comes along with it when it comes to navigating the interior life and being sensitive to, you know, the movements movements of the soul.
Well, so kind of on that note of like increase like the spiritual benefits of it, like it's hard to everything you kind of just described as a positive is a very like, from my personal experience, I noticed this. So it's hard to kind of package that up and say, oh, this is, you know, I'm going to persuade you with my argument right now why this is a better thing. It's almost like something you have to just say, you need to try this and just see how it benefits your life. But too, with like the discipline aspect,
or you could say, here's how it benefited my life.
Right. Here's how it benefits my life. You should try it and see if you find the same benefits. But as far as the some of the benefits, I think there's something very true about being able to be faced with a challenge. I mean, it doesn't even have to be sexual. It could be any challenge in your life where you feel this overwhelming desire to do one thing, but it's the wrong thing, but then you end up doing the right thing against this overwhelming drive to do something that you're not supposed to do, and then overcoming that, and you kind of gain, like you said, like a sense of clarity or a sense of especially like a sense of clarity. Maybe so like that's what it is like resisting the sexual temptations is like it allows you to grow as a person. I think
another way of talking about this, to kind of borrow some language from my own profession of engineering, is when you're talking about how you want a system to behave, you have requirements for behavior, which is the system must do this, the system must be able to do that. You don't define it by what it doesn't do. It doesn't crash and burn. It doesn't injure the personnel. That's, you know, maybe some of that is articulated, but if you're talking about how to build a crane, you know, it's not supposed to fly away into the clouds. Like list all the things it's not supposed to do. There's infinite. So many things it's not supposed to do. Infinite, you can think of an infinite number of things a crane shouldn't do. So what should the crane do? And you come up with a list of requirements for how it should behave. Okay. Which is, it should be able to lift this much weight. It should be able to rotate in these positions. It should be able to, articulate in these positions. And, it should have, this, resistance to corrosion and whatever. And you have behavioral requirements. And I think a requirement is not a law. A requirement is it's almost kind of vague.
I should be able to lift up this many pounds. Well, it doesn't matter if you're lifting crates of wood or steel. A pound is a pound. Like it's vague enough to have multiple applications. So I guess what I'm getting
So
at
yeah,
is,
what is that? How does there's sort of requirements for sexual, like the sexual?
No, I think there's requirements for the Catholic life.
Okay.
Whereas what should a human being do? Mm-hmm. And there's so many different ways of living out your life, like mm-hmm. which are good. There's so many different ways of living out your life that are good. Like maybe it's my purpose to have a career in engineering. Maybe it's my purpose to raise a family. Maybe it's not. Mm-hmm. But there's different ways of living a good life. Mm-hmm. So instead of having laws, we have requirements.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
we have requirements, which are it doesn't matter if you're lifting wood or steel. You should be able to lift 50 pounds.
Yeah,
that's a requirement. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what you're lifting. And so maybe the requirement is the requirement would be you're supposed to act in accordance with your body's design. Mm-hmm. That's a requirement. It doesn't tell you exactly how to do it.
Right.
But it's just it's a performance requirement.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's actually wow. I actually really like. That's actually a very interesting way of putting that. And yeah.
Which is why it's hard to come up with.
Yeah.
Which is why it's hard to come up with laws or rules.
Yeah.
For how to live, and it's easy to come up with a bunch of things that you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But as far as requirements, baseball's the same way. If you look in the rule book, it's really a requirements book.
Yeah. Yeah.
so to speak. I shouldn't say that. It's more of a physics book. Here's the physics of the game. Here's what happens when a runner hits first base. Here's or home plate. There's a sort of physics that's laid out there.
So
I'm very much in my head right now.
No, it's okay. So going back to this requirements thing. So how would you for the church's teaching on how you should behave on sexual morality or just sexuality as a whole, our requirement is. I would say, I guess the requirement is that we use our sexuality in a way that is open to the production of human life. That's kind of that's kind of like the natural, that's kind of the NFP type thing. So
it's a sub requirement of doing what your body's designed to do.
Right. Do what your body's designed to do, which,
and your reproductive system is designed to reproduce. So use it for that.
Yeah.
If you're going to use your reproductive system, use it for that purpose.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you exactly how.
Right.
But it's a requirement.
Because technically, technically there's a lot of different
a lot of different ways.
1,000 ways to skin a cat. There's 1,000 different ways.
If that's what you're doing in bed, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of different ways you can follow that follow that rule. So
right.
So if you look at so I guess kind of just going back to our original point of how do we look at positive injunctions? So if we look at it from the perspective of, okay, well, I'm going to use my body in the way it's designed to be used, and then just go from there. That is definitely a lot different way of thinking about it than just, don't use your body this way,
Right. And so the question is, how does it follow? How do the negative rules follow from that? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people might get hung up on, mm-hmm. which is, I think people can see the logic at this point, which is do what your body's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of adhering to a strict natural law kind of ethic, do what your do with your reproductive system what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Use it for reproductive purposes, or in the context which is possible to reproduce.
Yeah.
How does it follow that you shouldn't masturbate?
Yeah.
I think people can see the logic.
Yeah.
You're just not using your reproductive system to reproduce.
Right.
So there's a logic to it. I think the hang up for people is, how do I actually want? I don't know if want is the right word. How do I become the kind of person who wants to live that lifestyle? Yeah. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Why would I adhere to that ethic?
Right.
And it's again, I think that's the broader context of do you ascribe to these Catholic requirements? Do you agree with the game? Mm-hmm. And you don't introduce people to baseball by starting with the infield fly rule.
Right.
You just got to fall in love with the game.
Yeah.
And see what it's doing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to articulate all that to people in one conversation, but I think it is possible to articulate the situation to people, where it's like, look, I can see why this doesn't make sense to you. Here's kind of my take, how I've experienced it. I think that's a great way of segueing into those or having those conversations. Which is, let's not get hung up with an infield fly rule. Let's talk about the game, and then when you kind of understand the game, maybe here's how the infield fly rule makes sense after the fact.
I think one of the big problems is I think people can intuitively grasp the positive injunction of use your body in a way, like use your body. So like for sexuality, use it in a way that is like, or use your body the way it's supposed to be used, or sexuality is supposed to be for production of human life. But like, I think the way our society is now, like we've kind of been told through different like means and different like media and stuff like that sexual, like, all right, so hold on, I'm just gonna just backtrack.
Well, there is a sense of maybe to riff off something you said there. When you're using your body for what it's supposed to do, maybe there is some strict rules that follow from that.
Yeah,
but it absolutely does come with a sense of harmony. And maybe that's related to what we were talking about before, which is that sort of spiritual clarity. When was it like, do you live like you have, when you're living, do you feel like you have a sense of harmony? Like if you felt a profound percent, oh my goodness, I'm getting tired.
Profound sense of harmony.
Yeah, like a profound sense of, firing on all cylinders and
smoothly. I mean,
and it's
sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but so what I was gonna say is, I think one of the problems with like getting this message across people is that the purpose of sexuality has been like greatly distorted in our society. So people think that the primary reason for sexuality is to feel a connection with another person, which that is definitely a part of sexuality, but from a strictly, I guess, like strictly biological, like the primary reason that sex exists is for the reproduction of the human species.
Yeah, I actually just thought, maybe a possible objection would be, well, you have pleasure receptors down there. What are those?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of those? To feel pleasure. So why don't you do that?
Yeah, that's
it
true.
is, you do, but that's a lower level requirement.
Yeah,
it's underneath a higher umbrella requirement of your reproductive system.
Right, but like, you
want to have all those working together in harmony.
Right. Why did nature have it so that there are pleasure receptors there, so that you would engage in the act, which brings about new human life? So.
And you enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's I think the sense of harmony that I'm talking about, which is I'm doing what my body is supposed to be doing, and I enjoy it, and it's a good thing, and you feel all that all at once, and I think there's that sense of harmony, or even if you're not having sex, like even if you're just having a purposeful life, if you're not in a relationship or anything, and but you're still chaste, I think that's a huge part of it, is a sense of harmony, like the Old Testament uses the word holiness, and I think it's kind of cool because you could go through different Romance languages, and the word holiness, there's a play on the word whole, and that's actually true in all the Romance languages in Latin, I think, last I checked, which is holiness, just it equals wholeness. So if you're following the rules and you're playing the game well, there's a sense of being whole, which is I'm doing what my body's supposed to be doing. The human being is following the requirements, the design specification for a human being.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, and it's a good thing, and it's beautiful. And
yeah.
You have that sort of spiritual sense of things being in harmony.
Yeah.
And that's cool because I've definitely felt that at times.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's nothing else quite like it.
Yeah. I definitely.
And you definitely lose that if you're just, there's one life you can live where I'm going to work, going to the gym, coming back, feeling like a schmuck. And it's like, let's say I spend an hour and watching porn a few days a week, and it's like, what am I doing with my life? I'm not. Am I doing anything meaningful? Even if I take time away to, let's say, maybe play piano afterwards. Mm-hmm. It's that versus I'm living in a state of flow. Mm-hmm. Let's just compare these two lifestyles. Or the lifestyle where I am, maybe sleeping around or watching porn, and it's like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, what's my legacy going to be? Mm-hmm. How is this going to work if I'm married and have kids?
Right.
Is this the kind of person I want to be? Am I developing myself, or what am I doing? Versus the lifestyle, if I'm constantly in a state of flow, maybe I have 5 extra hours a week where instead of, sleeping around, maybe I have those extra hours a week developing myself. Mm-hmm. If you do an extra 5 hours a week for a year, that ends you're weeks ahead of your alternative self. Mm-hmm. Weeks. Mm-hmm. And that has a long term, that's kind of a practical way of thinking about it,
adding up all that time.
But again, this is just thinking about ways of phrasing it in a positive way, in mm-hmm. terms of positive injunctions, in terms of requirements, mm-hmm. to borrow the engineering phrase.
Yeah.
Versus, let's not think about it in terms of negative rules and try to tell negative narratives about these negative rules. Mm-hmm. Don't masturbate because it's selfish, because it's inward facing. It's like, maybe that's true in a context, but it doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't tell you what to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell the crane how to be a good crane.
Right.
How do we tell the human how to be a good human? Let's try and develop that kind of language. Mm-hmm. That's my dream here.
Yeah.
Which I've been trying to lay out in a I can.
Yeah, that's like good food for thought, I guess. And I can't really think of anything to add to that, but yeah.
One more thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is, for the practicing Catholics I know who struggle with this, mm-hmm. no one wishes the rules were different. Mm-hmm. That's a weird observation, mm-hmm. at least that I made about myself. Mm-hmm. It's, there were times when I've been breaking the rules and it's like I don't follow them, but I never wished that the rules were different. Mm-hmm. Maybe I wished I was better at following the rules, or maybe I decided not to follow them, but I never actually wished that they were different. Yeah. And that was something interesting. Mm-hmm. That it's like, it's like, it's a good thing that there are these rules out there.
Yeah.
Because because if I were to follow them, it would be a good lifestyle. It's almost like baseball. I think about it like baseball. It's like, here's a game, and there's rules to the game, and I'm glad that there's a game called baseball out there.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, which is, I'm glad that there's the Catholic game out there. Mm-hmm. Because I followed those rules pretty successfully before.
It's not like
it was a great lifestyle. Like, it was the best as far as a lifestyle goes. It was great.
Yeah, it's not like you
and I'm glad that game exists.
It's not like in baseball.
I don't wish for it to go away.
Right. It's not like if you were playing baseball and you strike out, you're like, damn it, I wish that strikeout rule wasn't a rule. You're like, man. Instead, you're like, man, I wish I had gotten better at hitting the ball.
Yeah, you don't wish for 4 strikes instead of 3 strikes.
You just you wish to be able to get better at hitting the ball. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's true, because I think people following this, they're able to they know when they do follow these rules in their life that there is benefit, and they kind of just innately see the benefit and the truth of it, I guess. That's the best way I can say that. So I don't know. So
I'm glad that there's a game out there called the Catholic Lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. So
I think that's a podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like
are we good with recording? I think.
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
Go ahead. You do.